Hi there, my name is Jessica Crow. I am the founder of Apogee and the host of Change Leader Insights. And this is a very special episode. It's, in fact, the final episode of Change Leader Insights with a guest. And it's a really full circle moment because I have here with me Hannah Jordan, who is an organizational change manager at Larimer County. And this is a big deal because I met Hannah back in 2022. We actually started working together when she was recently certified. She was moving into a change management role. She had a different background. I'll let her explain that in just a moment. And we were working together to help her take her skills from being kind of new in the space to applying them at her place of work. And I got to interview her after we'd worked together. If you go back and check out, I'll include this in the show notes. She was my first guest on the show in 2023. So if you go back and watch that episode, it'll be a really fun arc based on the conversation that we're having here today. Hannah, thank you again. This is really special because of all the reasons I just mentioned. But before we get into the conversation, which will be about the evolution of being a change leader in your place of work, in your career, give us the backstory for those of listeners and viewers who are just hearing about you and your story today. Who are you? What do you do? And how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, you're not the only one who's excited. I'm very excited to be here today as well. Um, I have been an organizational change manager at Larimer County, so local government in Colorado, in the IT department with the project management office for about 5 years now. But before that, I had an entirely different career, different path in my life. I was a social worker. I did direct case management for individuals in the domestic violence shelter, single parents who are going back to school, and really worked in that nonprofit sector as a social worker for a long time. Decided to make a career pivot, originally pursued like computer programming.
Hmm.
Realized I couldn't do that. It was missing the people component that I loved so much, and then fell into change management and have been here ever
Yeah.
since.
Yeah, I love that. And your story, interestingly, so many people, I'll use the air quotes, fall into change management. But I think the common thread is what you mentioned earlier, the focus on people and how do we bring people together around a common cause, a common solution and change. So, yeah. So, with that being in mind, so when you made that leap, made that transition into change management, what were some of the thoughts, fears, concerns that you had at the time? And then we'll get into some of the here's what I've learned along the way.
Yeah. So some of the fears and worries that I had at the time was like, I didn't know about change management. Really, the first time I had heard about change management was when I was applying for this job,
Yeah.
and was just kind of learning about what it was, what it meant, did a little bit of research on my own. And I was like, okay, I think I've done some of these things before, like
Yep.
without the title of that. So I did
Yep.
recognize that I had skills that could kind of cross over into this realm. But then I was like, it's like sounds like a real discipline. Like there's like things you need to know and you need to do it a certain way. So I was really concerned that I didn't have the formal certification, training, education of one, what it was to be a change manager, but two, what it was to be with other project managers and business analysts and Scrum frameworks and Agile frameworks and all this like stuff that is
Yeah.
there to support transformation with technology. And so I was concerned that my lack of formal education was going to hinder my ability to be a successful change manager.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people moving into this space feel that way too. To your point, though, so much of what change managers, change leaders do, they've already done before, but they don't have the framework to think about how to implement and move forward in a more strategic and guided way as a discipline. So, what are some of the things, Hannah, that from where you were, right, starting out, you got certified, you and I started working together, and then fast forward to now? Obviously, you've learned a lot. You've grown through experience, through feedback, lessons learned. What are some of the things that were, you thought would be true and lasting then that have evolved? Maybe your mindset around them has evolved. And then what are some things that you just weren't prepared for or didn't even expect that now you are aware of?
Yeah.
And start wherever you want to start.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, I rewatched the interview that we did in 2023. And what was funny is a lot of the things I said in that interview still resonate with me today. So
I love
all
that.
about like, I provide value because I have that unique perspective where I'm thinking about people. And I have to remember that that's something that's special
Mhm.
about what I bring to the table. And sometimes just thinking about people is enough.
Yeah.
And then I think another thing I talked about in my previous interview was about trust
Yeah.
and developing trust and how important that is. And I think really how I've evolved since I first started was, I was so worried about not following the right steps. But
Mhm.
when I took that pressure out of the picture and I trusted the things that I knew in my gut, I actually was more successful. So while I still believe those things that I said in my initial interview, I feel like I've developed it a little bit more.
Right.
And I think one of the things that I've learned the most is how important connection is. So, not only is it someone trusting me, but it's also me trusting someone else. So, I think that it's easy to forget that, believe it or not, as a change manager, you're not going to know everything. And that's
Right.
okay. And you actually shouldn't. And there's
Right.
benefit in learning from others. So, if you can help others develop trust in you, it's
Mhm.
also important that you trust them when they're telling you something.
Yeah.
And so to not forget that when you're building your change management strategies, your plans, your approaches, is that other people have information and you can trust them and you can infuse it into your work and ultimately help something be even better than what you could have come up with on your own or than you
Yeah.
could have researched, you know?
Right, absolutely. You actually have a really great story too, if you don't mind sharing from your early days when you were really focused on following the steps and making sure you had the process right. And did you have the framework? But that, you know, when you and I were working together, sort of not blew up, but then you had this aha moment when you reached out. You were working with one of the departments within the county. Do you mind sharing that story to really reinforce how the value of trusting yourself and building relationships and building that trust really became clear, that was a good moment for you.
Yeah, so I was on a project where, you know, we had a sponsor switch in the middle of this project, and the sponsor wasn't fully on board. The new sponsor was kind of an assigned sponsor,
Mhm. Mhm.
and their change management maturity wasn't very high. They didn't really know what change management was. They heard the term, but they were like, I'm not really sure that this is gonna work for us.
Right.
And so I was about to start doing a change champion kind of workshop and I was ready to roll that out, but I needed buy-in from the sponsor in order to do it. And basically they were like, no, don't do that. I was like,
Bad idea. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, okay. So I listened to what his concerns were and why he thought that that approach wouldn't work and kind of modified and scaled my plan to kind of meet what he was saying. But I think what also I heard in our conversation together was like, I think he was a little skeptical of me. He was kind of like, I'm not really sure about this lady in IT. Like,
Right.
she seems all right, but I'm not quite so sure that I'm believing what she's saying. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go have breakfast. Let's just go chat, right? So we went and we talked and we just kind of got to know each other a little bit. And we didn't really even talk about the project or the effort or anything change management related. But that was a key moment in us developing a relationship enough to be able to move forward because I think at that point, he really believed that I cared as much about his people as he did. And that was
Mhm.
what mattered to him was that I also cared about his people.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that story so much because it changed the trajectory of, you and your success on the project, and it was such a simple act of taking the time to get to know someone and show that you care because it's easy, especially if you're not in the same department or even the same state, right? There's a lot of work that's happening remotely. if we don't take that time to get to know our peers, our colleagues, our stakeholders, then it's going to be a lot easier for them to be like, nope, not for me, because they don't have that trust and understanding. So I love that story so much because I remember it and I saw it, firsthand how it changed everything for you. What's really cool too is having worked with Larimer County for a couple of times over the years, I've seen how the overall maturity of change management as a capability has grown and evolved. And it went from being something that was like, we know we're doing this, we know we need to do it, continue to do it, to, most recently when we were thinking about when, Larimer County was thinking about shifting some things around, the key message, the pervasive message was don't mess with change management because it's such a great, valuable capability and understanding. And so much work has gone into it over the years to make it so successful as a function and a discipline within Larimer County. So that's been really fun to watch. Let's talk a little bit though about, we're kind of building on this topic of relationships and how that is really important because you and I've talked about how important conversations are, maybe even more so than some of the deliverables or the artifacts that change managers produce as part of the project. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience there and how your perception or your understanding of the value of those conversations versus artifacts really became true for you?
Yeah. So, what's funny about me is I'm a highly structured person. So I process through structure. So I love a pretty good deliverable and I love documenting it and I love putting it
Yeah.
together. And what I realized is that those were helpful for me, but really where the real value came from was what those deliverables could then get me through conversation. So, how I would use and still to this day use those deliverables is as a means for creating alignment and conversation and additional clarity. So,
Mhm.
for example, one of the things that I really struggled with when I first started was like, what's the difference between a plan and a strategy? I was like, I
Right.
don't really
Right.
understand the difference between these two. And it literally took me probably 3 years to like wrap my brain
Right.
around. And then
Yeah.
what I realized is kind of what we were talking about before is like some things come so naturally to me that I'm not aware that other people might not be seeing the reason behind why I'm recommending what I'm recommending.
Mhm.
So we started doing change management strategies to kind of help illuminate here's where I think we need to go, and here's why. Based on the information I've gathered and I know through conversations and through what people have told me, here's what I'm recommending, and here's the key things we need to be considering.
Mhm.
And what that does is it allows for people to kind of get a peek into my brain and kind of where I'm going, kind of fill in any gaps that I maybe didn't see or didn't pick up on, but then also be able to move forward with clarity, right? So it's not a
Mhm.
shock when I'm like, we can't be sending out that deliverable or that communication from this person. Like it needs to come from this
Right.
person. And then you have to
Right.
have a conversation about why. We've already had that conversation because of what we know. So I think that that is really cool. I think one of the other things that really stands out to me is that I would say it's rare that people remember the actual deliverable,
Mhm.
but I commonly have people say to me, do you remember that time we talked about blah, 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 blah? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that. And it was kind of around the deliverable, but it was the conversation that they remember.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what stands out to them. And that's what they have realized is an important piece of change management that I think is honestly something that as a change manager is hard because it's like, well,
Mhm.
what are you doing? Well, I had conversations today, you know?
Right. Right.
And that
Yeah.
was successful. And so it's kind of how do you explain that those pieces are important steps and components of the process, and the deliverable can either be an outcome or a tool to help support that, but it's not really where the real value lies.
Totally agree with you, and I love how you've articulated that because I have seen from my own experience in working with clients that there's a lot of change managers who focus on the deliverable and then they check the box like, "I completed this stakeholder assessment and a communication plan, therefore my job as a change manager is done." And what you're saying is so important for people to hear and understand that that is for you, the conversation is really where the value, manifests. And I've had clients where they wanted me to just complete a bunch of tools for them. I'm like, this is a really expensive just handing over of stuff that you're not going to do very much with because we didn't have that conversation. So, for those that are listening, if you're working with the change management client or a consulting firm, make sure you have conversations, not just the tools. And if you have change managers in your organization, focus on the conversation, not the pretty slide decks, not the tools as well. Let them guide the conversation. So I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah, I think
What
there's
about
well, I
Yeah,
think one
yeah.
thing that I'd wanna say in addition to that, which was because in my beginning journey, I kinda felt bad sometimes when I didn't
Yeah.
always finish the deliverable.
Oh,
You know what I
right.
mean? Like, it wasn't
Yeah,
always like, I'll go back to projects and things that I started and then I stopped
yeah.
doing, and I was like, "Ooh, I didn't finish that." But the
Right.
reason I didn't finish that was because I got to a certain point that I knew enough and I had
Yeah,
enough of what I needed that it wasn't necessary. And so I had
absolutely.
to kind of shift that from that highly structured brain, which is like you gotta finish the thing, to
Yeah.
you achieved your goal because you got to this
Yes.
certain point. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of
Uh
reframing in my head.
I love it. Well, what's funny too, I kind of building on that actually, when you and I first started working together, you also like don't like change. And so you were a little hung up on how can I be a change manager if I don't enjoy change myself? So tell us a little bit about how you made that reframe and like what that looks like for you as well.
Yeah. So, yes, I'm a change manager who doesn't like change. It's a big fun joke in my department because everyone knows this about me and they think it's really funny. But I think really what how I reframed it is that I can actually am skilled handling being uncomfortable, right?
Mhm.
So because I'm skilled at being uncomfortable, I can kind of take on that role a little bit and
Mhm.
I can do that on behalf of others who might feel similar to me about change. So what that then looks like is I can ask the hard questions. I can figure out where the gaps are, figure out where the details are. Like if I have a question, I might be able to say, like, okay, I think probably other people will have this question as well. And
Yeah.
so it's actually not a hindrance to me where I first thought it was, but I think it's a benefit in a lot of ways. It hinders me in others because it's harder for me to take the stance of the people who are super excited about change and love it and are
Right,
like,
the early adopters.
just flip the switch and it's fine. I don't need to know. Like I don't understand
Yeah.
that. But I think that is there is more understanding I can do of those people, and I can balance out we have a more of those people, especially when they're IT initiatives, it's shiny, new, exciting, they're already excited about it, so they can
Yeah.
have that perspective, and I can have
Yeah.
this other, like, maybe a little bit healthy skepticism
I was gonna
perspective.
say healthy skepticism,
Yeah.
yeah, and then you are able to put yourself in the shoes of those who are going to be impacted by the change, taking the most, I would say, healthy healthily skeptical stance because that's what's needed, that's how you're gonna surface and unearth the details and information that is so necessary. I love that story. Okay, so last thing, and I think this is an important message for, you know, change managers, change leaders. Let's talk about the difference that you have realized between influence and title, right? So obviously there are sponsors of projects and programs who are leading the change. Maybe they don't have the official title, but how do you truly activate and implement change in the organization? Is it because someone says that people have to do it because of where they sit in the organization, or is it something else? Tell us what you have learned along the way.
Yeah. So I think what's unique about government in particular is that we have diverse departments. We have a very spread out, like, hierarchical structure and leadership structure. And I think what I've learned and what I kind of, have shifted my thinking from, which is like, it's got to be that leadership position, communicates, that articulates, that does all of those things. And there's sometimes where that makes sense and sometimes where it's not enough to just have the positional authority to make a decision. And you really have to figure out and understand who is influential in an organization in order to make change really work. And it might be that person that has been here for a long time and knows everybody's pet's name and knows everybody's favorite color, right? And that is
Yeah.
the person, even if they're not that impacted by this change, but that is the person who is what I've started calling a make or break stakeholder.
Ooh, I like
If
that.
this person does not make the change, is our change going to be successful?
Ooh, I like that. How to think
And
of that.
yeah, and so that's kind of how I've started thinking about stakeholders, and some of the ways that I analyze them is like, who are the ones that like are really critical to our success? But I
And that's title agnostic. So
yeah,
I love that.
yeah,
Yeah.
title agnostic. And I think change impact agnostic potentially as
Mhm.
well. I think that that's important to call out too, because
Yeah.
they might not look on paper like there's someone you need to pay attention to.
Right.
And so keeping that in mind, and you only know that through conversation. So anyway, I'll
So
tie
true.
that all together. But I think in addition to that, I think at the time when I first started, I didn't realize that I could have influence and how
Mhm.
much my influence matters. And it's different to me than the relationship piece.
Mhm.
Because I can have a relationship with someone and not be able to influence them.
Mhm.
And I think that originally I was like, well, I used to joke about this. I'm just some random lady in IT. Like, I don't matter
Right.
to anybody.
Yeah.
But the more time I've spent with change is actually I can have significant influence because of the way that I show up, and it can be a tool to kind of help support. So I would say for leaders who have change managers, don't forget about the influence that your change managers can have in
Yeah.
this change, even if they don't have a senior or director title or anything like that. Like, don't discredit the influence that they can have in helping your change be successful.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's a testament too to the maturity of the capability that you and your team have been able to build at Larimer County because of your influence. And so you've built trust and credibility. People believe that you are going to do what you say you're going to do over and over and over again. You've demonstrated that. And that's where that influence has come from. So I love that because it isn't, again, title agnostic. It's about you as the human, and people know that when Hannah's on the project, like, thank goodness things are going to get done. So it's a really important message for leaders of change managers, for change managers who may feel like I don't have positional authority. How do I do this without that? Well, it's by showing up consistently and doing all the things that you're saying over and over again. That's really how you build your brand in many ways. This has been again, I love this because I can go back and watch the beginning of the first episode to this episode and how Hannah has evolved as a mature change leader, which is so cool. Is there anything for people who are out there thinking about getting into roles that are dedicated change management or just leveraging and thinking about how they can be more effective as leaders of people, projects, and programs? Any advice you want to impart on them before we wrap up today's show?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice that I have is don't get too hung up on the deliverable, the detail, the how, right?
Mhm.
Remember the why you're doing what you're doing. And the reason that that's important is that there's so many options out there. Like, I think at this point I've sat through so many webinars, I have multiple certifications, I've done, all these different things. I see everyone's model, everyone's idea. And what I realize is that it's the why that's consistent. So if you are consistently connecting to why am I here? Why am I providing value? Why do I matter in this context, in this change? And what can I bring that's different? You'll be more successful than if you're focusing on the how do I complete this thing, this
Yeah.
task.
Absolutely. I love that. What a great way to wrap this whole thing up. Viewers, listeners out there, thank you for being a part of the Change Leader Insights journey over the last few years. I think I've had this podcast for 4 years now, maybe 5. I don't know. But it's been a fun ride because I've been able to meet and connect and learn from so many amazing guests. And Hannah, you've been one of them, and both as a guest and as someone that I've just really grown very fond of over the years because of our relationship, professional and as a friend. So I'm really glad that you're the final guest on my show.
I'm so
And thank you
honored.
so much. Yes, oh my gosh, me too. So thank you. And I have no doubt you're going to continue to do great things and inspire the people that are on your team to kind of live and operate the way that you do through all the great work that you're doing. And hopefully, if you've been listening and watching this show, you feel inspired and motivated to keep doing the great work that you're doing, supporting people through the often murky transitions that go along with change. So, thank you again for your time. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Hannah.